What is the secret power of the universe that creates a quantum field? How can you use thoughts to change matter? And why does it take exactly 8 people to create a special healing power? Our guest for today has specialized in all of these fields and many more, and she has made scientific studies to all of these questions. So I'm very honored to welcome here Lynne McTaggart. She's a journalist, she's a consciousness pioneer and bestseller author. Welcome at Mystica TV.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Great to have you here. And for you today, have fun with the talk. Okay, Lynne, you just gave a seminar here in this area in Bavaria. We're here in the studio in Munich. How was it?
It was so fabulous. I always love German audiences and audiences of all kinds around the world, but we did a very deep dive into group intention. And it had amazing, powerful effects, as it always does. And it was such an enthusiastic audience. And it's just very life-enhancing, the work I do, because I get to see people heal, I get to see people improve, and it's just really miraculous. And it never stops being miraculous for me.
So let's start when we're talking about regions. I'm so curious about you coming from New York. You were born in New York City, you were raised in New Jersey, as you just told me, but you also spent a very important time for your life in New York. And I would like to know whether this experience also kind of made the path to where you are today.
I was one of those people who knew I was going to be a writer from the age of 7. And I studied literature at university, and then I wanted to come out and be a journalist. And my initial plan was to be an investigative reporter and put bad guys into jail. And I did that. When I was 23, my first big story was posing as an unwed mother and then as a prospective adoptive parent with a colleague of mine. And I broke some international baby selling rings, one of which imported German girls who were pregnant at a time when abortion was still illegal. And when they had nowhere to go, this ring used to bring them to New York, have their babies in New York, and their babies would be adopted by American parents. And these poor girls didn't know really what was going on. They were just trying to hide their condition. So I broke that, and it was a huge baby selling ring, and I also found some other ones around the world. So that became my first book, The Baby Brokers. Wow. And again, that was going to be my career. I was going to put bad guys in jail. And it was only with my second book, which brought me to the UK, where essentially I got derailed and hijacked and suddenly was in this field.
So what was hijacking? Who hijacked you, or what was it?
What hijacked me was I got interested in writing about health and alternative medicine. And my husband, when I got to the UK, I met my husband, we married, and he's also a journalist. And we decided to start a newsletter at the time called What Doctors Don't Tell You. And it was in the course of doing that work, which entailed looking at very good studies and medical literature, that I found these extraordinary studies of spiritual healing. And I thought to myself, wait a minute, if you can have a thought and take it to someone else, send it to someone else and make them better, that in itself undermines everything. And we think about how the universe works. So I wanted to investigate why. Why does acupuncture work? Why does spiritual healing work? So I persuaded my publishers to let me go on a journey without a compass. I didn't know what I was looking for. So I started interviewing pioneering scientists in consciousness research at Princeton University and Freiburg and elsewhere. And I discovered that each of them had found a tiny piece of what compounded into a completely new science, a new view of the world. And that view, which I had to synthesize, because scientists don't like to speculate about what this all means, and they also don't want to move beyond their little patch. And finally, they speak in code, they speak in math. So I had to decode all of that. And that job fell to me, became my book, The Field, and changed the messenger.
Well, the field is a good hint. Today in Germany, if we talk about, we have spiritual people talking to each other, they say, oh, we have this and that in the field, you know, there's a lot of anger in the field, or there's a lot of joy in the field, and so many brave people and all this. So it's also part of our code. You just said code, they're talking maths. So we in Germany, we talk about the field almost every day, and all those videos and all those talks. So I consider it as some kind of a pioneer work that you did with a book called The Field as a title. I'll just look it up what year it was. I think 2003 it came out. Is that true?
Over here, yeah. It first came out in 2001. It'll be almost 25 years old in a few years. So yeah, no one had used that term before, so I guess that was mine.
How did you really get to that it must be not, you could also have said a spot or a forest. It's a metaphor, it's a picture, a field. Why did you use that term?
Well, in quantum physics, it actually is a field. In science, it's a field, and a field is essentially a space of influence of subatomic particles. In this case, it's a quantum field, and it's real. And I named it the field because there is such a thing as a zero-point field, which is composed of this. Subatomic matter isn't what we think about it. It isn't little tiny billiard balls, you know, like you see in chemistry class or physics class. They are vibrating packets of energy, constantly trading energy back and forth, and like a little game of subatomic tennis. When they do that, that trade becomes a virtual particle, and that is there for just less than a blink of an eye. But when you add up all the little tennis games with all these virtual particles popping in and out, you come up with this unfathomable amount of energy just sitting out there in empty space as a field. To give you an idea of how powerful this is, if you were to measure that energy in just the space between you and me, you would be able to take that and boil all the oceans of the world.
Are you serious?
I am serious.
I can't believe it.
It is what scientists have told me. So that is all out there in empty space, and we are part of it. So people ask me all the time, how do I enter the field? And I said, well, you don't need to enter it. There's no door needed here. You are part of the field. We're all part of the field. Our subatomic particles are doing the same little energy tennis game as everything else.
Well, I'm very interested in this point because there's people who have a very, let's say, a strong field, but they have something like a fence around them, so things don't get that easily in and out. And then there's people that are very thin on that, let's call it, border. So if they come into a field, then they are in that immediately. But then when they get out, all the beauty and the miracles and everything that is in that beautiful field is gone. So I would like to ask you if you have a recommendation for people who have that very thin layer. If they feel they don't have a real field, but they get very easily in and out, what can they do to stabilize that personal field?
That's a great question. They are empaths, and they pick up other people's energy all the time. Other people, you know, we are sending out energy. We are all composed of tiny particles of light, and we emit that light. They're called biophoton emissions, and they've been discovered by a famous physicist, German physicist, the late Fritz Albert Popp, who found all living things are sending out this tiny current of light. And we are also having a synchronicitous conversation all the time with light. My subatomic particles and my light energy is communicating with yours and back and forth. He demonstrated that, and so have many other scientists now. It's not supposition, it's fact. All living things are having this little light conversation. Thoughts are part of that too. So some people are highly influenced by other people's thoughts, highly influenced, and they have no boundaries. And some people are blocked off. They don't allow other thoughts in. Well, I have an easy way to do that, which is simply, believe it or not, for those people who are empaths, holding on to the thought of what you were born to do is one of the most powerful methods, and it's a method that I teach in my classes, and it's one of the most powerful ways of not letting negative stuff in. And it's for all people.
It sounds like an automatism, as if you focus on that, you don't have to focus on building up some kind of fences or golden bubbles around you or something. It's just, it comes intrinsically. That's how it sounds. Is that true?
It is intrinsic, but it's been measured by kinesiology, muscle testing, measured by the late John Diamond, who was the person who invented behavioral kinesiology. It had been used for toxic substances, but he also recognized you could use it to test toxic thoughts. So if I said to you, and standing across from you, your mother doesn't love you, your arm would go weak because it's a toxic thought. And what he showed is when you hold on to that homing thought, that thought of what you were born to do, what gives you a connection with the divine, that keeps that strong, no matter what's thrown at you.
Okay, that's interesting. So let's dive back to the spot that we were before, between New York City and London. You said you came from getting people to prison who did something really bad and then going to the spirituality. But just one step back, that feeling in New York that you had when past your study time, that was a very special time there. I think it was a very spiritual time also. Do you think you are nurtured from this energy still?
From New York energy? Mm-hmm. Oh, yes. New York was a great place to be alive right after university when you were young. It's the kind of place where if you want a bagel at 3 a.m, you can get a bagel at 3 a.m. And I had a group of great friends. We had a ball. We had a great time in New York. It was a wonderful time to be a young woman there. And it was then time to move on. When I moved on to London, that was another great time.
What year was it?
1983.
Okay.
1983. Yeah. So I moved on in 1983 and, of course, met my husband. We had children. We created our business and we created a new life. But, New York has an energy and a vibrance all to itself that's really unique. London has a different wonderful energy. I was happy to go. When I left New York, I felt like, okay, I'd had that experience, time for a new one.
Mm-hmm. But both cities are pioneer cities, and that time, 1983, it was a pioneer time also for music, for the arts. So what you did is also, I think it's a big part of the arts, even though you did science, you really went that path to prove scientifically that spirituality is not some esoteric thing. It's really, really fact stuff. That's correct.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I am as spiritual as you like, but I don't like unsubstantiated woo-woo. I like things that are demonstrated, because then Western minds need proof. We need proof. We've been brought up to expect proof. And when you can provide proof of things, you can convince people who are doubting Thomases, who don't believe. You suddenly say, this is unassailable. This is the work of scientists. They've proven the miraculous. So that's exactly where I sit, in between science and fact and miracles.
So can you give us an example of one of your experiments that you made, especially at the field? Let's start with that. What is the field?
Okay, well, When you talk about an experiment, I haven't done experiments with the field, but many other scientists did. And that's what I reported on for the science. For myself, when I finished the field, there was some unfinished business. You know, there were a lot of scientists doing work with the power of intention, showing that thoughts can affect everything from single-celled organisms to full-fledged human beings. So the journalist in me was very curious, and I said, how far can we take this? What are we talking about here? Are we talking about just shifting a little quantum particle, or are we talking about curing cancer with our thoughts? And I was also curious about numbers. I wondered, what happens if lots of people are thinking the same thought at the same time? Does it magnify the effect? So I started thinking about it, and I thought, well, I'd interviewed a lot of scientists for the field. And I also had a lot of readers by that time. The field was in 30 languages. So I thought, if I just put them together, I'll have the biggest global laboratory in the world. And I can test the power of intention, the power of thoughts to affect things. Because that was really the key to it, is thoughts were not only things and an energy, but thoughts that are trespassers. They go out and they affect other things. So I thought, okay, let's measure this. So I wrote a book called The Intention Experiment, which, as a follow-up book, covered all of the science of intention, but it was also an invitation. It was also saying, okay, let's come together. At times, I'll announce that I'm going to do an intention experiment. All my readers can come onto my website or some other platform, and I will work with a scientist to set up a specific target, a specific experiment. So we started with University of Arizona, and since that time I've worked with nothing but prestigious scientists at prestigious universities like Princeton, Penn State, Pennsylvania State, University of California, University of Arizona, and also Freiburg, and a university in Russia with different scientists, so I couldn't be accused of bias. And we've done everything from trying to make seeds grow faster, to purifying water, to lowering violence in very violent places or war-torn areas, to healing someone of post-traumatic stress disorder. Of the 41 experiments that we've done to date, all of those different types, 37 have been demonstrated to show measurable, positive, mostly significant effects.
Wow.
To give you some sort of contrast, something to compare it with, there is no pharmaceutical drug out there with that kind of consistent track record.
Oh, interesting. Good reference. Could you give us just one of those examples to describe what actually you did so that people have a more vivid picture how you do it?
Sure. Let me describe a few. The first one I want to describe is about seeds, because we ran this experiment 6 times. What the scientists would do, this was with the University of Arizona, Dr. Gary Schwartz, a noted psychologist, oversaw this experiment with the whole lab team. They put sets of seeds, 30 seeds each, into 4 little trays and labeled them A, B, C, or D. They sent me the photographs of them, and my job was to choose one of them, or have my audience choose, and then at the end of the experiment, we would not tell the scientists which ones we chose. We'd tell them we were done. That would be their cue to plant the seeds, and then 5 days later measure them, measure the seedlings. So of all 4 sets. So the first time I ran this was in Sydney, Australia. I was in front of an audience of about 700. The seeds are in Tucson, Arizona. So I show them the photo. We choose a set, let's say set A. I tell the scientists we're done. They plant the seeds. 5 days later, they measure them. The seed scent intention grew significantly higher than controls. We ran that 5 more times in New York, in South Carolina, in Dallas, Texas, in Los Angeles, and then over the internet with my internet audience. Every single time, the seeds sent intention grew significantly higher than controls. At one point, with a group of healers in South Carolina, they grew double the size of the regular seeds. So let's unpack this. Let's take the first one, Sydney, Australia. I'm in Sydney, Australia with my audience. The seeds are in Tucson, Arizona, 8,000 miles away. And we're not sending intention to the seeds themselves, we're sending intention to a photographic representation of the seeds, and yet we have an effect. So I started thinking, there's a psychic internet that we create when we come together as a group, whether we are in the same room together or scattered around the globe, as we were with that final one when I did it over the internet. We had a powerful effect.
That's so impressive, and I would like to really go to that point where you set the intention. So let's go back to Sydney, Australia, the 700 people and you, and looking at the picture of those 4 trays. In the moment you say, okay, let's take the tray A. Does it take 5 minutes of focusing, of concentration, of deep breathing, meditation? What actually did you do with the people? Was it just a second, or was it half an hour intensive, loving, and what did you do?
Okay, that's a great question. I developed a whole method of doing intention after studying intention masters like master healers, Buddhist monks, Qigong masters. And I distilled some of their techniques that were common to each of them into a simple practice. But I also looked at and added to that some of the things that had worked in the scientific laboratory when they were doing mind over matter or intention experiments. So, and then we were learning as we went along what to do. All people do is hold a very specific intention for 10 minutes. They do not meditate ahead of time. There is no priming other than some breathing together. And I'll tell you why in a moment, why we don't do meditation. But we started out doing 10 minutes for our very first experiment after the book was published, again with University of Arizona, because I and Dr. Schwartz talked over how long do you think people can hold this thought if they've never been practiced in doing things like meditation. And we both decided 10 minutes. And that's how we started. We didn't know if it was going to work, and it did work. Mm-hmm. And the other thing we discovered over time was being specific is really important. Don't just send love to water. When we did that, it didn't work. It was one of the 4 that didn't work. When we were very specific and said we want to move it by a pH in one direction or another, then it worked. So it's 10 minutes, and to this day, I never have people do intention for more than 10 minutes. Power of 8 groups, no matter what they're healing or doing, they're trying to lower violence. If they're trying to heal somebody of some amazing disease, 10 minutes, that's all they need. It's not meditation. And we know this because we've done brainwave studies with a team of neuroscientists on Power of 8 groups. With student volunteers, we used students from Life University, the largest and most prestigious chiropractic university in the world. And they were interested in the Power of 8 groups, so we worked with them. And we found, to our astonishment, that the brainwave signatures that we found after putting an EEG cap to measure brainwaves on one member of each group, there was an immediate effect, and it looked nothing like the brainwave signatures of meditation, which caused an increase in alpha waves and theta waves, a slowing of brainwaves. Ours weren't slowing down, they were turning off. The parts of the brain that were like this, the parietal lobes, they help us navigate through space. They tell us, this is me, this is not me. They were dialed way down. And so were the right frontal lobes, which are involved with worry, doubt, negativity. They were also dialed down. These people were not like meditators. What the brainwave signatures looked almost identical to were brainwaves recorded by Dr. Andrew Newberg, then of University of Pennsylvania, studying Sufi masters during chanting and Buddhist monks during ecstatic prayer. These were people from our Power of Eight groups, in this case, which is the smaller group intention. These people were in a state of ecstatic oneness. And I think that is why it works. That's the secret sauce here.
Okay, so ecstatic oneness, that's the key. Thank you very much for sharing this, because it's a secret key. Of course, now it's public, but to get there, you cannot just go like this and you have ecstatic oneness.
Okay.
What do you think?
You can, if you have a group. Now, remember, these groups, the groups that were studied at Life University were student volunteers. They weren't experienced meditators. Most of them had never meditated before. In fact, I think none of them had. They didn't know much about Power of Eight. They didn't know anything about this. They weren't necessarily into it at all. And yet they achieved that state within a minute or two. So there is something about intending in a group that puts us in that state. It's a fast track to the miraculous, I've come to believe. And it goes against all of our thoughts that you need years of practice, like you do when you want to be a Buddhist monk, or hours of priming, like you do if you're a Sufi master getting into the whirling dervishes. You don't need any of that. You just need a group and a common intention, and it's your gateway.
And can you describe it or compare it with some kind of geometrical form? Is it a spiral? Is it a cube? Is it a pyramid? What is it? Or is it like something like a circle that is moving? What is it?
It's a great idea. It's a great question. It's not a spiral or any of those things. I guess the closest thing is a circle, but what it is connected consciousness. You know, we talk about being in the field. I'm in the field. You know, I'm entering the field. All of those things. But we don't experience life in oneness. Thanks to the scientific story we were given by Isaac Newton, who described a very well-behaved universe of separate objects operating according to fixed laws in time and space. Very well-behaved, separate objects. And the work of Charles Darwin, who described the universe as essentially struggle. Life is struggle. There isn't enough to go around, so it's eat or be eaten.
Competition.
You know, competition. So we have this sense of competitive individualism that is the paradigm by which we live. But we don't, because of that, we don't get to experience oneness very often. Our true essence is oneness. We are all connected via this subatomic field, but we don't experience life like that. But we do when we do intention in a group. So I think that is one of the numerous reasons why Power of Eight groups are so powerful, and why these groups cause major healings, major changes, and why people can get into the state so quickly.
How did you come to the number 8? Was it numerology? Was it an accident of a laboratory experiment? What was it?
So I started doing these intention experiments, and you know, we took baby steps from seeds to water and so forth, and I saw some extraordinary effects. So I wanted to try to shrink this down to a workshop setting. We were running a workshop, and I was kicking it around with my husband and our team members. And I said, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this. Maybe I'll just put them in groups of 8 or so and have them send intention to someone with a health challenge. And, you know, maybe it'll be a nice little feel-good exercise. And my husband's a great headline writer, and he said, I love it, the power of 8. And that's literally how it got started.
And in German, sorry to interrupt, in German it's even greater, I think. It's die Macht der Acht. It's a rhyme, Macht, Acht. So the 8 is inside of the word power.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow.
He was a very good headliner. He was already thinking unconsciously of other languages, maybe.
Oh, German. I love that. I love that. So that's what we did in that first workshop in 2008. We didn't expect much. I thought it was going to be a feel-good effect, like somebody coming up behind you and rubbing your back a little bit. But we did it one day, and the next day when they came back, we asked the people who had been the receivers, how was it for you? Expecting, again, mild feel-good effect. That's not what happened. We had somebody with bad arthritis who had been limping the day before, who walked in normally. We had somebody else saying, I have really bad depression, and it feels lifted. And someone else with irritable bowel syndrome who said, my gut feels normal today. And then somebody else, the most amazing, with cataracts, who said they're about 80% better. So I was blown off my chair. I did not expect this, and I was frightened by it. I thought, ooh, what's this? I'm not a healer, I'm a journalist. So I kept experimenting with it and trying to learn about it. And we saw, you know, thousands of healings. I've seen 3 people get up out of their wheelchairs. One person paralyzed from the neck down. It sounds amazing, but I've seen this. There was a woman who worked, who took one of my classes, who was going blind. Doctors couldn't do anything for her. She couldn't focus, she couldn't drive. She has 20/20 vision after a couple of Power of 8 sessions. Somebody else who was going deaf, or was deaf, regained her hearing. Somebody else with a genetic liver disease where she was going to have a liver transplant. It was deteriorating, and that was the only route for her. One Power of 8 session, one 10-minute session, and her liver is normal. And we have on camera her reading out the letter from her consultant doctors saying, your liver and your spleen are normal. And they weren't. They'd been scanned for years, weren't normal for years. And many, many more stage 4 cancers, many of them being reversed, and more.
What means 20/20 vision? Is that
perfect vision.
Perfect. Okay.
She has perfect vision
From
now.
blindness to?
Near blindness to perfect vision.
Incredible.
And many, many more things, not just in health, but in other areas too. I have a class that I run online called the Power of 8 Intention Masterclass, where after I started seeing this and working with people and studying it and thinking about it and working it out over years, and it took me 10 years to get the courage to actually publish this in a book. I kept saying, I need to know more. I need to know more. Why does this work? Why are people getting healed? Why is it just 10 minutes? You know, what's going on here, basically? And I finally published the book. But I have seen in my course, my year-long course, where I teach people live and online, I then put them in groups of 8 and have them work together weekly for a whole year. And that's where we see the people who show up every week. They're the ones that have transformed lives. So it's not just health. They do intentions for getting more money, for their finances, for a new career, for restoring their relationships, or getting a new one. I had one woman, Joy, who really wanted a new relationship, and she was probably in her 60s. And this was during lockdown. She was in Australia. She does an intention with her group, and very shortly afterward, gets a call from the UK. I kid you not. Her boyfriend from 35 years ago calls her up They start talking, communicating, connecting, and before long he makes the big plunge and he decides to come to Australia from UK. During quarantine, he has to go through 2 weeks of quarantine in a hotel, moves in with her happily ever after. And so many things like this.
You said something very important. It's about how much energy and how much, I call it love in this sense maybe, you give into that group. So you can have a great group. A lot of people are working in groups at the moment, but then, you know, they're on that group, maybe in a WhatsApp group, and they think, oh, I'm going to look at it, and that's it. And then they wonder why nothing happens. But it's the real deep intention and the passion that you give into this group. And the more you give, the more comes back. And it's not a gambling thing or some kind of deal. I think that's very important. It's the power of altruism. And you were talking so much about altruism. Could you give us a little elaborate on that?
Absolutely. That's probably one of the big things that distinguishes my work. It's not just about self-help, it's other help too. And other help and how that creates a mirror effect for you. I spent many years trying to figure out why this works. And I've come up with a number of conclusions, and one of them is altruism. You know, there's intention effects, no doubt. Intention works. Thoughts are things that affect other things. There is a group effect, and as you say, there is a kind of collective effervescence, as one psychologist put it about groups. But then there's altruism. 7/8 of the time, you're intending for someone else. I started looking into the science of altruism. And honestly, altruism is like a bulletproof vest. People who do things for other people live longer, healthier, happier lives when you look at the science. If you're a volunteer, you're going to live 2/3 longer than other people. If you're ill with something, you're more likely to get better if you help other people with the same illness. And I've seen it over and over again with our groups. People get healed not just by receiving, but by sending. We have amazing stories of people who are stuck and suddenly they do something for someone else and their life changes. One of my favorite examples of that was a fellow called Wes Chapman. Wes had a really tragic life. He was going to be a doctor or a biochemist. He was a bright young man. But he got called up to go to Vietnam the very last year of the war when there was no more student deferment. So he went, and it was so traumatic for him. He came back, dropped out of college, and his life continued in a totally awful spiral. He even met the love of his life, his second wife, and she didn't last long. She got a fast-growing brain cancer and died. And he also lost his house paying for her medical bills. It was just tragic. So by the time I met him, he was 65 and had given up. You know, it was hard for him to even get out of bed in the morning. He joined a Power of 8 group I had set up in a local Mile High church, it was, in Denver. And he didn't get intention. He was going to put himself forward because he suffered from ongoing depression. But he said there was a woman in the group who was more needy. She had an advanced cancer. So he was a sender. Next day, he suddenly feels, I can get up in the morning. I want to do stuff. He starts saying hello to people. The next night, he has a dream, like this lucid dream almost, of being back on campus, meeting his 19-year-old self, who somehow communicates to him, there's still time. Wes was like Scrooge on Christmas morning, running around, just being full of love and transformation. He was a totally transformed person, started exercising again, started taking classes, writing, communicating, being part of his church, a real active part again, loving people. He was transformed. One little intention.
So that's a very extreme story. A lot of people, they believe those stories and they think, wow, that's great, but it cannot have anything to do with me, of course, because me, I mean, nobody can help me. That's a reflex a lot of people have, or the immediate reaction. I think it's a big step to believe in oneself. I mean, so much has been talked about believe in yourself and everything, and the more people talk about it, I think the more they hide when they don't believe in themselves. So maybe as a last question, could you give us a little help for those friends who pretend maybe for Instagram or for their beauty shots to, of course, believe in themselves, but inside, they doubt and, they suffer, and it's not that easy.
It's not that easy, but one of the things that's so powerful about a Power of 8 group is that you have a group of people who start out perhaps as strangers. And in my classes or even my workshops, in-person workshops, people don't know each other. And we put people together in the workshop we just ran in Erding. We put people in groups of 8, and they sat around a table from the very beginning. So they didn't know these people. By the end of the weekend, they were best friends. And that is what happens in a group. When you show up week after week, and you have a group of strangers who have such love and care for you, send you selfless healing, and you experience this week after week, it is totally transformational. And people begin to believe in themselves. I have a woman who was too terrified to even put forward herself as an intention. She was doing for everyone else, and that's a very common syndrome. People, they can do it for other people, but not for themselves. And suddenly she recognized, I have a right to have this healing too. I can have this too. And probably the best demonstration of this, these bunch of strangers who have your back, who want to help you and become your new intention family. There was a fellow called Jerry who was in one of my classes, year-long class. He does it for a year, and this is down in lockdown. And he decides to take it again. And I said, Jerry, you're going to learn the same things over again. Why are you doing it? He said, you know what? I wanted more. I've had more love during the COVID season than I've ever had in my life. And he then said at the end of the second year, I now know what love is. And I think that's the answer. And that's the solution, and that's the healer.
Thank you so much, Lynne McTaggart, for sharing all this with us, and for your visit here in Germany. We wish you a lot of great experiences and great people to go with you on that path, because I think it's really worth it. And I hope for you to at home today here that this came across, that it's really worth it to work in groups and use the power of 8. Bye-bye.